But you know, the rise of Democrats in Idaho is just a microcosm of what's been happening around the region, and the rise of Western Democrats is one of the great untold stories. It's an untold story because Western election returns happen after midnight back east, and everybody back there has gone to bed. But it is a story worth telling and retelling, because when I first got into politics at the national level, the West was one great swath of red. We went 4 consecutive presidential elections, 72, 76, 80, 84, where the Democratic nominee didn't win a single Western state. And the 2 elections on either end of that, in 68, we won 1. In 88, we won 2. So for 20 years there, half the country was just completely out of the Democrats' reach. And if you set aside the 1964 election, when LBJ won a landslide, the Democratic drought goes all the way back to Harry Truman. Adlai Stevenson didn't win any Western states. John Kennedy won Nevada and New Mexico. So over the course of about 40 years, we won a grand total of 7 Western states in 9 different elections, setting aside 1964. So, and what was especially frustrating about that long drought for all of us in Democratic politics in the West was that we were doing pretty well at the state and local level. Here in Idaho, we elected some great Democrats. Cecil Andrus and John Evans held the state house for Idaho Democrats for 20 years. And remarkably, they did it at a time when we were getting tasted at the presidential level. We were losing 70% to candidates like Ronald Reagan, and we didn't win a single federal race except when Richard Stallings beat George Hansen, who'd just been convicted and was on his way to prison, and we only beat him by 200 votes. So by the end of the 80s, a bunch of us who had grown up in long-suffering red states in the West and the South got together and decided that if we could win if states in the West and the South could elect Democrats at the state level, then there's no reason why they couldn't elect a Democrat president. And sure enough, in 1992, Bill Clinton and Al Gore, my first 2 bosses, came along and cleaned up in the West. Those 2 guys are pretty good at rescue missions, don't you think? Yeah. In 1992, we won 7 Western states, which is, as I said, was as many Western states in one election as we'd won in 9 previous elections of the great Democratic drought. And it kept on going. We won 6 in 96. And then this past year, Barack Obama and Joe Biden won half a dozen Western states against 2 Westerners, John McCain and Sarah Palin. We're very proud of Sarah Palin here in North Idaho. And you know, someday maybe a graduate of North Idaho College will be elected president, but we can rest assured that is not going to be Sarah Palin. So we've come a long way, and actually the transformation of the Democratic Party in the West has been every bit as great at the state and local level as it has been at the presidential level. You go up and down the West Coast and the Intermountain West, and you see some amazing success stories. California went red in 5 out of 6, I think, presidential elections. Colorado went Republican in 6 consecutive presidential elections, and look at it now. They have a Democratic governor, they have a Democratic House, they have a Democratic Senate, they have 2 Democratic senators, and they have a Democratic House delegation, congressional delegation, that is 5 Democrats to 2 Republicans. It's an amazing story. And we've seen incredible transformations like that elsewhere in Montana. We've got governors who've done very well up and down the Intermountain West. And if the Gallup poll has done hundreds of thousands of interviews over the past 6 months of voter attitudes around the country, And they, just this past week, they put out the state-by-state numbers for that. And in the entire West, 11 states, there are only 4 states where Democrats didn't have a party ID advantage. We actually led Republicans in 7 out of 11 Western states. Sadly for those of us here, we're not quite there in Idaho and Wyoming and Alaska and Utah, but we're getting there. And that's an amazing thing. There are, I think if I were growing up in Idaho today, I might think I had a future in politics, which definitely was not the case at the time I was here. And it's a wonderful thing. But, we can't just reflect on how we got here. The question is now, what are we going to do with it? And I can remember a great Democratic congresswoman from Colorado, Patricia Schroeder, who was asked in the mid-'80s, how do Democrats win back the White House? And she said, well, to win back the White House, Democrats have to do 3 things. Unfortunately, nobody knows what they are. But the great thing about winning in the West is we know what we have to do. We know the 3 things we have to do. We know first thing we have to do is hold on to the gains we've made. It is a massive historic significance that we have won back the first congressional seat here in Idaho. And if Walt Minnick wins in 2010, the Republicans will never touch him again. That seat will be golden for good. And the same is true, it's not just true here. In the last election in 2008, we elected 5 Democratic House freshmen in very, very tough districts. I had lunch the other day with Betsy Markey from Colorado, who is a fabulous woman, and I think her district hadn't gone Democratic since 1972. So we have an unbelievable opportunity in 2010 to solidify some incredible gains. The most important, in my view, the most important Senate race next year is also in Colorado, where the guy on the ballot is going to be this young freshman, Michael Bennett, who was superintendent of the Denver schools and is a fabulous young guy. He's the smartest guy in education in Congress at the moment. He filled the seat that Ken Salazar left to become Secretary of Interior, and so he's having to run for re-election to the United States Senate statewide when he's never been elected to anything in a very competitive year with only a couple of years under his belt. But I think he's going to win. He's a great candidate. He's a great guy. And every one of you from every Western state has a vested interest in making sure that guys like Michael Bennett can win. Looks like the thunderstorm's coming in here, so I'll make it quick. But the second thing we need to do, in addition to holding on our gains, onto our gains, is we need to keep setting our sights high. Nobody in Idaho should be discouraged. There are a lot of states, there are a lot of big races that we can win. I think next year we ought to be able to win back the governorship in California and in Arizona. And I'm not giving up on Utah either. That one is within our reach. And if you look at how much politics can change over time, you even have to have a lot of hope for a place like Idaho, where if you look at the demographics of Boise is growing more and more moderate. It's gaining population rapidly. If those 2 trends continue for another decade or so, the Republicans are going to be very, very nervous. This state is not going to be a lock for them at all.